encierra tres nostalgias, tres tristezas. La tristeza del inmigrante, la tristeza del gaucho, un personaje típico de nuestra campaña, y la tristeza del negro, que no vino acá como inmigrante, que fue traído y dejando todo allá en África.
Para continuar la historia de esta patria, hay que trabajar y sin decir mamá.
Okay. So.
Okay, can I have everybody in the Zoom room turn on their videos? If you're up for turning on your video.
I'm gonna finish my dinner and then I'll jump on.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks everybody for being here. We have a little bit of a structure in mind for the call. We very much welcome anybody to jump in at any point, and we'll be sort of stopping purposefully to talk and engage in discussion. Dave, you want to take it from here?
Well, we reviewed the last week's show, and there were a lot of great ideas and suggestions in it. And one of them was that we really go back into our history for answers. And so we thought a good place to start would be to study the history of Blackness in Tango, which in itself, I think, is an interesting subject, not only in the history of Blackness in Tango, but everything surrounding how we discuss that. The clip that we just watched was from a movie called Tango Negro. I think it came out roughly 10 years ago, advancing the idea that is referred to as controversial in the movie and is referred to as controversial many places that you see this idea, which is that that there were Black people in Argentina. Not only were they in Argentina, but they had a profound impact on tango. That in itself, I remember actually reading a review of the movie which said, well, it's a nice movie, and they mention that it's controversial, but they don't present the counter argument, which is a good point. And we've actually gone looking for the counter argument, and it's not honestly clear to me what the counter argument is. We're definitely going to go. We're going to try to go through the history and show in some detail what the influence was. But I'm also interested in, I guess, talking about why this is a controversial idea, why it doesn't seem like we talk a lot about it. It's not that we don't talk about the history of tango. Why are we so focused on the 40s? Why are we so focused on the 20s? Why don't we focus on this aspect of it? For myself, I think that it has to do with that I went into tango, and I think in many ways to escape aspects of my own culture that I didn't want to really engage with or deal with. I think, going not only into tango, but to Argentina, for me, what I chose to see of Argentina allowed me to escape from the American dream and how I was going to grapple with that. Certain ideas about gender, that I saw to be different in tango and in Argentina. And also, I didn't have to think about the racial issues in my own culture, because it seemed at first glance as though Argentina didn't have those issues, as if it seemed that they had immigrants, and so they had different races, and they had issues surrounding that, but they didn't seem to have Afro-Argentines who had come involuntarily as slaves, and this this turns out just not to be true. They did in huge quantities, and they had them around the time that tango was being developed, and so we're going to go into that. But this influence not only on the tango but on the country has been in many cases systematically erased from the culture, and so by not talking about it, we're kind of perpetuating that. So I guess, yeah, I'll stop talking now, but for me, it really raises a lot of questions that I don't have great answers for. And really changes for me has been just spending the last week, really reading a lot and studying this topic has really changed the way that I see my relationship to tango. And so that's the plan.
Great. If anybody has anything they want to say, we welcome it. Otherwise, we'll kind of just dive right in.
Yeah, I could say a few words.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I haven't seen this movie, and the clip, for some reason, I couldn't see the video, but I was hearing what it was saying, and that's exactly my understanding from my own research, that I did for my dissertation, that since the beginning of the 1800s, which is the beginning of the 19th century, there was a large population of Black people in Buenos Aires, and different sources put it at 30% roughly, although they do say that's probably underestimated. And these people had different so-called nations, and of various Black communities. And by the mid-century, they're coding maybe around, and that's the middle of the 19th century, about 25%, a quarter of the population of Buenos Aires is Black. And all these various nations have their own dances. And a lot of them were featured in the carnavals, that, these dance processions that happen in Buenos Aires. As far as tango, now I don't necessarily want to get into much detail now. I can do it later, or if you want me to. But as far as the influence on tango, the biggest influence from the Black community in Buenos Aires was a dance they had that was called candombe, which also refers to a music, but also refers to a dance, and also refers to a gathering or a self-help group. But that was a definite precursor of the tango. Had a very clear influence, direct influence on the tango. And so we can, I can get into more detail later, but something about, that disappearance, by the end of the 19th century and the 20th century, the Black population in Buenos Aires and also in Argentina at large was much less. And no one knows exactly what happened, but the various causes are that, they write about, that they state, or they took all these guys, because Argentina had a lot of civil war and also war with other countries, that they enlisted a lot of Black people in the armies, and so a lot of them got killed in these wars. They talk about yellow fever, various things no one knows exactly, but by the end of the 19th century, this population was much less. Nevertheless, they still definitely exerted their influence on the tango, and not only through the dance, but also through Black musicians as well. So there's more that I can say, but I'll stop here for now.
Well, I'm glad to hear, that what you're saying does align very well with, the research that we've been doing. We have kind of basically a list of dates that we could go through and maybe address them in order to give a framework for the history. Does anyone else just want to weigh in on this general topic? Or I'm always curious just to hear what is, you guys already know all this? What is your conception of tango origins, and is this part of it?
So I knew a little bit of the history of Argentina and the colonization and the subsequent disappearance of African or Black people in Argentina. When I started tango, for me, it wasn't really a deterrent, but as a country in South America, it is obvious that there isn't a large Black or African population in Argentina compared to some of the neighboring countries in South America, like Brazil, for example, or Uruguay. So, but in most things, in most music, it wasn't really surprising to learn or hear that tango music is largely influenced, or to a degree anyway, influenced by African music. That's not really surprising. And truthfully, you can hear a little bit of the influence in some of the music. So yeah.
Most music.
I'm sorry?
I was just saying it's like most music, right?
Yeah.
R&B, rock, punk, it all has those roots.
Agreed.
I feel like I want to say hi and meet the people.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sure, yeah,
We have a tendency to jump right in.
Well, yeah, okay, sure. Why don't we just introduce ourselves real quick? I'm Megan. I know.
Yeah, I'm Roddy.
I'm Roddy. I'm Nicole. Hi.
Nicole, hi. Roddy.
Hi.
Sachin, you're on mute.
Hi,
What's
Lilia.
Hello, good to see you.
What's your name?
Good to see everybody.
Hey.
Hi guys, this is Lauren.
Hi, Sachin.
My boyfriend Matthias.
I was drinking wine, sure. Don't mind me.
Hey, Lauren.
Hi.
Oh, hi.
I'm not ready to show my face yet.
Okay.
That's all right.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
So should I maybe
So-
share this screen?
Yeah, please. Yeah, so yeah, for me, the tango story that was in my mind was super European centric, sort of this like dreamy immigrant story. There's always sort of this vague nod to African roots, but certainly not the weight and the position that that the African contributions deserve. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this and start correcting this.
So are you guys seeing this document here?
Yeah.
I guess I would want to stress we're not experts. We're just Googling and following Google links and Wikipedia and doing the best we can. So, you know, we're hoping that people know more about this than we do and weigh in and correct us. You know, we're all learning together here, but these are some important dates and statistics that seem to tell the story. We've just arranged them in order and maybe we can just kind of respond to them together. This first chart here really tells, in some ways, tells you all you need to know. First of all, it tells you that the percentage, this is just Buenos Aires, but is actually even more in other parts of the country, the Black population. You've got it 30%, you know, all the way through to 1840. And if you just think about that, I mean, I think the Black population of the U.S. is somewhere in the low teens, right? And look at the impact that population has had on our music and culture. How could a 30% of Buenos Aires not have a profound impact? Now we're gonna detail that, but and then you've got this rather alarming drop in 1887. If you look at the population number, it's strange that the population is dropping from 14,000 to 8,000 as the rest of the population is growing so much. So a lot of the drop in percentage is a huge influx of white immigrants. But that was intentional also. We're going to get into that. And then there were some other reasons for that drop. One of which is actually just a change in the census to involve more terms for what race you are that would allow people to stop thinking of themselves as Black, as best as I can understand. So.
Hey, David.
Yes.
This is Lauren. This is a rumor. And this is a rumor that I was told by most Argentinians that I have spoken this to about, and mainly dancers that have traveled here to America. And then when we talk about, well, North America, because there's South America. When we talk about the racial issues that happen here in North America, most of them do deny that they do have an actual racial issue there. And when they do talk about the Africans and the slaves that they had around this time, where it looks like that percent drops a lot once slavery was no longer a thing, or once they were starting to diminish it. I guess the president at their time, and again, this is just words that are told to me by multiple Argentinians, that the president of their time decided to, because they didn't know what to do with the slaves once slavery was no longer a thing, so they decided to just push them out of Argentina and send them to the next sister countries, which were Uruguay and Brazil, and that's why you have a higher percentage of I guess Afro South Americans there than you do have in actual Argentina.
Thanks, Lauren.
And the tango, we will go into more detail, is happening sort of between, starting around 1860. So somewhere between, as that drop is happening, we're also seeing the development of the tango. So first date here we have is just main commercial activity in Buenos Aires was the slave trade to South America. Anyone who's been to Buenos Aires knows there's this big train station, Retiro. This was news to me, that was the center of the slave trade to South America, but it was. (1800), 50% of the interior, 30% of Buenos Aires, 25% of Uruguay. We should mention that we haven't really done Uruguay justice. We just didn't have time in this. We're mentioning it a couple times, but it also figures very prominently in the history of tango. Also had a large Black population, did not have such a precipitous drop as far as I can tell. I think you still have 5% of Uruguay that identifies as Black today. So 1806, 700 enslaved Afro-Argentines fought during the British invasion of Buenos Aires. (1810), War of Independence from Spain, enslaved Afro-Argentines instrumental to victory. We had something called the Free Womb Act in 1813, which freed people that were born from that date on. And for people that had already been born, you had the option to get your freedom by serving in the military. So you had things like 2,500 people crossing the Andes to Chile and all dying. Free womb law was in Uruguay in 25, slavery abolished in 42 in Uruguay, in 53 in Argentina, but not in Buenos Aires. And finally, slavery abolished in Buenos Aires in 1860. Sorry, this should say 1866. First Argentinian written reference to tango is in a newspaper quoting song La Coqueta. We could play that for you, you would recognize it. And then I suspect we'll delve more into this. This is the part that Roddy and Lauren were talking about. You've got Sarmiento taking over 1868 to 1874. The Blanqueamiento, the whitening campaign, seems to be part of trying to be more like Europe, kind of being the Europe of South America, being whiter, avoiding problems that the US has, was all part of the rhetoric. And it seemed to have several parts. Sending Blacks to fight against Paraguay. Yellow fever seemed to be a big part of it. Unsurprisingly, as we can see today, it hit the Black population harder than everybody else. And also a very deliberate immigration campaign to bring a lot more white people to Argentina to quote, purify the race is I think some of the rhetoric that was being used. Anyone else want to weigh in on this?
Nice research, David.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
1872, famous poem, El Gaucho Martín Fierro, recounts getting in a fight with a Black gaucho. So, just that there were Black gauchos. I don't know that people knew that, but you have the influence not only, when there's the video clip we showed, it says, well, these are the three tristezas. There's the European loneliness and the gaucho loneliness and the Black loneliness. The gaucho loneliness actually has some Black loneliness inside of it too. You could find it there also. 1876, a tango candombe called El Merengue. Couldn't find this one actually. Becomes very popular, considered turning point in the development of tango. We're just sort of tracking, tango coming into the picture here. 1880, 20 Afro-Argentine newspapers in Buenos Aires, still publishing. 1884, we have a song called Concha Sucia. It means dirty vagina, by Afro-Argentine Casimiro Alcorta. Seems to have an amazing career. Son of enslaved Africans, became free as a child. Worked as 1855 to 1913. Seemed traveling around a lot with another Black musician, Sinforoso, one of the first tango groups, and he's given credit for Entrada Prohibida, forbidden entry. Seems like a very telling title. El Choclo, extremely famous tango. And then Cara Sucia, when, who was it? I think it was Canaro, I can't remember, but someone, when they got it, I'm sorry, Disali. They re-recorded it. Instead of Concha Sucia, they changed it to Cara Sucia. When they got around to recording it, dirty face. There's just so many levels to the cover up there. Anyway, and many of his tangos are lost, and it seems that he also wrote a lot that were attributed to other people. So it seems like a very important figure. 1895, we have the first copyrighted tango score in El Enterriano. Again, we could go do this. I think it might be better uses of our time, but all these tangos that I'm mentioning, if I played them, you'd be like, oh yeah, I know that one. These are big tangos still. Written by Afro-Argentine Rosendo Mendizábal. I thought this was interesting. 1889, the Royal Academy of Spanish, I assume which means Spain Spanish, Spanish, defines tango as a popular celebration and dancing of Black people in America. It was actually another very long time before the dance became an official definition. So I just thought that was interesting. There are quite a few musicians and composers. The last one we'll just sort of dwell on is Carlos Posadas. Did a lot of composition, also transcription of people that didn't, that composed but didn't read and write music. Known for Retirao, El Jaguel, Cordón de Oro, and El Tamango. Again, tangos that you would certainly recognize if we played them. He's operating a little bit later. So that's just, I guess, just sort of a sketch of the history. Oh, I can okay, good.
Yeah, I got you. I wasn't sure if we were done yet.
Yep.
Okay, so there's actually, there's a lot more to it than that. I'm just curious. Yeah, I'm curious what folks are thinking, responses to that.
Hello. Oh, I don't know. I think my video probably froze, but hopefully you guys can hear me. No, it sounds like both you and David are on the right track. This is what I had to go through when I was looking up the music, and I was just purely just trying to understand the music. It wasn't an intent; it was following down the rabbit hole, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I just followed down the rabbit hole, and this is where it led me. So that's what I was saying, where if I had insomnia and I'm like, it's 3 a.m. Oh, Latin American history will put me to sleep. So that's what I did. Like, I was just really just trying to understand why there were certain instruments present in the music and other instruments not present in the music, especially the drums. So I was just kind of like, I'm trying to figure this out. But there's still that drum-like quality in the music. So I thought that was very interesting. And I think that's just part of the adaptation they went through. So yeah, keep going. I know, it's tough, keep going.
I think that's, I think that's a really great observation. At numerous times, the drums it was just prohibited to play drums at all. as kind of a form of suppression. So I don't know. I'm not sure about this, but it just seems sort of telling that part of whitening tango was taking the drums out of it.
Well,
Sorry?
I was looking it up yesterday, and drums are a form of communication. It's a form of passing out signals to other groups or other neighboring tribes that may be enslaved, but someone's like, oh, there's another person of mine. So the goal was to stop the communication. So it's not just here in Argentina, those that were enslaved, there's a pattern of that. If I stop the drums or if I stop the singing or whatever, just something to stop the communication. Otherwise, you can send out messages and then everyone mobilizes. So that was the goal, to stop the mobilization.
Yes, I was actually just talking to Matias about this because I know in my eyes in particular, I know that the drums are extremely important to Argentinians. However, they do use it in a different way. They mainly use it with their folklore music. And bombos are a very huge thing, and it's really a part of their culture, and it goes with the whole idea of the gaucho. But I'm just gonna let Matias talk about that a little bit.
Hi guys, how are you doing?
Hello.
Hi, Matthias.
Good. So no, I just wanted to quickly comment on the fact that when you think of tango, even the early tangos from La Guardia Vieja, the very traditional tangos from the 1800s, you mainly might think of instruments, not necessarily the bandoneon, but for example, an acoustic guitar or a flute. And the reason why you might find a lot of tangos played with those instruments is because those were the main instrument that the Spanish people that moved to Argentina brought with them. Basically, the Spanish guitar, the flute. So since most of these musicians or Spanish people were living in Buenos Aires, that's where mainly tango became, alive. But then if you could go up north in Argentina, you could still find folkloric music, and that folkloric music does uses percussion. The difference is that tango never really embraced the percussion as much as the Argentinian folklore, that was also a mix between Spanish music and native South American music that was already being performed by the natives in Argentina. So that's the difference. That's why tango doesn't have drums, but doesn't mean that Argentina, we don't have drums in our music. It just means that tango became alive mainly from melodic instruments with playing along with songs. And there is a lot of Argentinian music, folkloric music, that is mainly drums, and the melodies are very big, but you will find those melodies and those type of music more in the north of Argentina.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a thought on this is just a thought. It's not very coherent, but I know David, in your slide you had the song El Choclo. And I know that's one of my favorite songs to hear and to dance to. But I think it raised the question of like attribution. Like I never really, I'm not a DJ and I'm not very well versed in like the tango music and where these songs come from. But the knowledge that song actually goes very far back and was attributed to to a Black artist. I guess I'm just wondering. I don't know if anybody here has the answer, but how does attribution work? Today in songs, like, is it recognized that song came from way back when? Is it just a matter of another orchestra picked it up? And like many songs in America, once you have a certain ethnicity of an orchestra picking it up, then it becomes popular. It might be attributed, but it becomes famous in the second or third iteration. I don't know. I'd just be really curious about that, but I know I don't have the answer.
Well, I can say something. That's exactly the case. What you're saying, like the famous version of El Choclo is by Di Sarli, and you really have to dig to find, the Afro-Argentine, original composer. It's not readily apparent.
do people think of it as a Desarli song? Like, I know it comes from Desarli, like the version that we hear.
Yeah.
But just the lyrics or just the melody. I mean, is that attributed to him, or is it something that he made famous, or do you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you do some research, you can pretty soon reach to the composer. But most dancers, or they just don't know that.
The main difference or the main thing to highlight is that El Choclo, if you think about even the name of that tango, it's like a horn.
Mm-hmm.
So you are immediately talking about the countryside. You are not talking about Buenos Aires, because when you think of Buenos Aires, and when I say Buenos Aires, I mean mainly the big city in Buenos Aires, you don't really think about a corn. So the composer is Ángel Villoldo, and it was a composer that was on the countryside. But the thing is that back then, music was not as mainstream or as popular as it was in Buenos Aires. So what these Italian composers did in Buenos Aires is they took these songs from the countryside that were already kind of popular in certain areas in Argentina, and they made them mainstream by playing them with their orchestras. And that's how people got to know these versions by, for example, Di Sarli or Di Arienzo, because they were actually taking these melodies, these folkloric melodies, and play them as tangos. That's why also you will find a lot of versions of El Choclo that is played like a slow milonga, because that's how they would perform it back then in the countryside. But yeah, you will find that a lot. Melodies that are more from the countryside, that usually their title describes something that you can find on a farm or about animals, and then you have, of course, the tango from Buenos Aires that is more connected to the dance, to, passion, love affairs. Yeah. The city, yeah. Mafia, all those things.
Yeah,
Matthias, would you say that this is a controversial idea, that there's a Black influence in tango in Argentina? Is this well known, well accepted?
Well, I mean, there is certainly an influence, because here is the thing. Nowadays, we can distinguish Uruguay from Argentina because these are two separate countries. But back then, Uruguay and Argentina were part of the same territory that was being, how do you say, like Spain was in charge basically of Argentina and Uruguay and part of Brazil. And because the main colonies in Europe were Portugal, no colonies, sorry, the main colonizers, I guess, were Portugal and Spain. And then up north, it was UK, right? And what's the other country that came to the US? The Irish. So you have in the north, the Irish people and the UK, people from UK, mainly colonizing here in America. And then in South America, you have people from Spain and Portugal. So when they brought Black people to Argentina, it was spread all around, but it wasn't called Argentina. It was the Virreinato del Río de la Plata, which means the kingdom of the Rio de la Plata, which is the most famous river that we have in the south. So it was all a big region. Therefore, the music that started in this area, yes, it was a mix between candombe, milonga, a little bit of the early tango, but it's not that, back then there was a separation from Argentina finishes here and Uruguay starts here. It was all part of the same region. And then in 1810, Argentina got its independency, but even so that we got our independency, we were still connected to Spain. So many things that were like all our processors and our important people were from Spain mainly. So that means that they were kind of the ones that were dictating, the lifestyle that you could have in the biggest cities, but still you would have, different colonies or areas where, for example, there were more Black people doing more candombe music, or more natives doing, more folklore music. It was all like you can find roots of every type of music I guess, depending on the region that you look for. But then, yeah, when Argentina became Argentina, things started to separate, and you can find, that maybe folklore is more up in the north, and the tango that we all know is more in Buenos Aires, and then candombe is more in the area of Uruguay, and so on.
So is it a controversial, like, is it if your average everyday tango dancer, analysis of Matthias and also everybody, I mean, do you think of it as a dance with African roots? Do you think of it as a Black dance as much as you think of it as a white dance? I think I have to admit that I thought of both the music and just the way that the whole thing looked as super white.
I love it.
And it seems curious. That's I think the rub of this conversation. What is that? Why?
I can tell you from a sort of academic point of view, it's not controversial at all.
What about socially?
Socially,
I'll add to that. Or you keep talking, Reddy. You keep talking.
Oh yeah, well, socially, most people just don't know.
Yeah, I'll agree with Reddy on that. Talking to a few people, it's a little hard to understand. It's not so much that the dance is controversial, it's that the dance itself is mixed with so much. So the music has influences of African beats, but do African steps are the way they moved, like candombe, which is something that they celebrate a lot in Argentina, that this is an African dance, this is candombe. However, is any of that influencing tango alone? We don't really know, because there's so much in general. There's so many immigrants that came in an early time. They were so open to so many different cultures in different continents, just coming in and basically integrating themselves into this dance. And I want to say mainly in a specific area that was, I would say, mainly in an area like when we talk about the ports and we talk about the brothels. I think we keep going back to this because this is an area where everyone from every part of their country would come to this particular area, and they would share what they had to give, whether it was through intimacy or socializing. So from my perspective, from what I have talked to other people, tango is a hot mess. And through that, I think if we just know that a lot of cultures influence this dance, it makes it definitely more acceptable and less controversial in general, but definitely more acceptable, that knowing this dance belongs to a lot of people, and that's why maybe they resonate with it. And that's my perspective.
Yeah. Also,
you're totally right. I just wanted to say that there are actually some dance moves that are documented that coming from Black dances. Mm-hmm. And one is the quebrada, which is described as a torsion of the hip together with the bending of the knee, is basically the milonguero dip. It's a quebrada, which comes from African dance, from the candombe. And also the kind of the cortes, the sudden stops in the dance, the cuts, another thing that comes from African dance. So there are documented dance moves from Black dances as well.
Nice, Reddy. And I think Matthias was going to say, oh no, never mind.
It seems to me that it's almost two different conversations, both of which are very interesting. One is where you try to, you break it down into habanera and candombe and the other influences, and you try to trace it all the way back to, which part of the Congo did this beat come from? And I suspect that if you go really, you probably get into some territory where it's hard to say. Did this beat come by way of Havana, or did it come through Brazil? And maybe at some point you start to hear what you want to hear. And that part to me seems a little bit murkier and open for discussion. What doesn't seem murky is that there were a lot of Black people there when it happened. And so they must have been a part of it. And to the extent that there were fewer of them as the years went on, that very fact would become a part of it too. And so, yeah, for me, it was almost two parts of it. And you can kind of get lost in is it really the candombe rhythm, or was it the thing that the Spanish brought, or, and again, just forgetting, no, there were all these Black people there when it was happening. They must have had impact on what was happening. So that, I guess that's just a distinction I make in my mind sometimes.
I don't find it really surprising that that's the case, especially when you consider all through South America and into North America, the colonialization of the native land, and then the import of the slave trade and the influence that it would have on it. It would seem that it would all just end up being pretty much of a melting pot and incorporating the traditions and cultures of the many different people that come there, that are there, that live, and then it evolves over time. And when you look at tango today and the huge diverse community that's there, although there are not that many Black people in tango, but still many people from many places are all brought together by this one dance, whether it's the dance itself or the music or the community, but it's still, it's still being influenced from many places and many sources. And I imagine will continue to evolve as a result. And, when somebody's sitting down talking about it another 100 years from now, they'll probably look at the influence that America has had on the evolution of tango in North America.
Where's David?
Mic drop, Stephanie.
Some
Drop Stephanie rolls.
Mind blown, everybody, huh?
I like to stay quiet for a minute because sometimes quiet people need a second to get in there.
Are you waiting for me? Oh, no. Anne Harsh, she had typed into the chat, and I was thanking her. She brought up eugenics, and it's like, if you're already sad now, it's going to get much worse, so just hop in for the ride. But you'll have to look at scientific racism, and I'm still learning about it as well. Because when you were asking about the answers get murkier the deeper you're going in, and the interactions between Africans and the powers of Europe at that time, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal. Britain came in much later than all the other countries, in Germany. But you have to think of that mindset at that time. And that mindset at that time was, you're very lowly and I'm much higher than you. And because I'm white, I'm much closer to God. And with scientific racism, they'll say, the whiter you are, the closer to God. The lower you are, the closer you are to basically monkeys. So a lot of that's much later with evolution, but that's kind of the mindset that goes in. And to for a lot of those histories, it is very hard, but that's what was happening. So like I said, I'm not a total expert in anything. I'm still, learning, but don't be surprised when you find those answers. That's what's going to surface to you. And it's like, it's so deep, because if you tack on religion to that, especially with the Spanish Inquisition, it just keeps getting worse. So, yeah.
I'm so curious. I'm so curious. Like, why don't we have Black dancers in tango, and what is arguably a Black dance? Why? It seems like
I'm wondering if it's. Sometimes I'm wondering, this is just me, I wonder if it's more of a money issue, because that requires discretionary income compared to, the income you get when you just pay for your food, your shelter, clothing after that. save that money. And if you just see a bunch of white people doing it, then you kind of think it's just for a bunch of white people. So I think also you just don't know. And like for me, when I started, I didn't know that it had any Black roots. I was just looking for a fun dance to try and just try to get to social dancing. I said, oh, there's tango. Oh, it's in my hometown. Okay, cool. It's just two and two. It works. Awesome. But a lot of it is just that not knowing.
Right.
That's all I got.
Yeah, I'll add to that, Megan, to answer that question as well. For me personally, I have noticed that if based off of, if you're thinking about it as like a Black person's point of view versus a white person's point of view, right? Like let's say Black culture in North America. I know that majority of the time, Black people are raised to learn things on the streets. I learned how to dance on the streets. I didn't actually go to a ballroom to learn how to dance. I know that there's a very, that's a different way of looking at something. I know I will agree with Nicole that most young kids, when they go to school to dance, their family is funding that for them as like a hobby or a potential career for them. They're thinking of it as that. I would say in the Black community, that's not really a thing. We don't think about, I'm going to have you go to a dance school or have you take this dance class to, have an extra curriculum or a hobby that you can add to your curriculums. So yeah, I personally never took a dance class until I take that back. I took dance classes that you could take when you are in school, like I did modern jazz and stuff like that, but never outside in like a private studio, which is where you would find Argentine tango or ballroom, these particular dances, especially partner dancing. My first partner dance was Argentine tango. My last partner dance is still Argentine tango, but that is my first partner dance that I came across in my mid-20s. And that was my first experience in being in like an actual private studio, learning this and dancing with other people. Any other experiences that I had with dance was either on the streets or what I learned that the schools provided for me while I was doing my other curricular activities. So I know that that's what I have noticed through my Black communities, that you just kind of flow and learn as you go along. Of course, that's changed now. We have YouTube, we have all these other things, and kids are learning in like a whole new different way on their own or with other people. But I would say if we think of the modern times, maybe that's why we're just now starting to see more Black people integrating themselves into these partner dances and going more to these social dances. Salsa, I know, is a lot different, but salsa also has this kind of energy that I think is more relatable. And I think it also has a particular way of seeing the culture that also makes it more acceptable for Black people to absorb that kind of dance. So yeah, culturally, like if I was being blunt, like Megan, yeah, like you don't think of Argentine tango as like Black people. You think of Argentine tango as like European or white people. Or even if you thought of Argentine tango at all, because I actually didn't know Argentine tango existed, but I did know that ballroom tango existed. And if anything at the time, I thought they were the same.
And I think that's a good point too. I think it's just something people don't recognize as something as being accessible. And to Nicole's point, I think it's, can be cost prohibitive for some people. And it's also not something that you go and you take a class one day and then you spend the whole night dancing, where you can probably do that with salsa because some of it's pretty intuitive if you just want to go out and have a good time. So I think those things make tango, people less likely to join tango. And it's not something that you typically see in Black communities. I was, when I saw Oxygen in Inglewood, that was like mind blown. And it was pretty awesome. And I thought it was very cool. But I think that as Lauren said, is, you know, with the advent of YouTube and other methods of other avenues of learning, that more people may begin to recognize it as a viable thing, and as it becomes, people become more exposed to it.
Yes, and I would definitely add to that. Is it Stephanie? Yeah, Stephanie. Yeah, that's perfect, Stephanie. And then you just totally reminded me that now we have this Kizomba. Kizomba? Is that
Kizomba.
Kizomba? Yes. So I think people are trying to find ways of, you know, again, like I talk about YouTube, other social media outlets where they're showing all of these dances, like, ooh, woo, what's that? You know, oh, that's tango. Oh, but it's Argentine tango, you know. I think there's so many people that are literally asking themselves, including myself, how can I make this quote cool so that these other people can be involved? Like, I would love for you know, people of my color to be more integrated into this dance. I do understand that you have to have a particular taste, and I did opera singing before this. So I will say that I naturally see old things as beautiful and something that I just want to just kind of take on for myself. I see Argentine tango as a very old school style. I embrace this old school traditional style, but that is my mindset. And I notice a lot of people that get into it, they'll have their own perception of it, but that's mine. So I think for the Black community, they have to somehow feel personal about it. And that's how I feel personal about it. But how could they feel personal about it without generalizing how it's going to make them personal about it? If that makes sense. Like, is it the music? Is it, you know, do the steps need to have something that resonates with steps that are more popular in the Black community, like hip hop steps or beat, or what do you, break dancing? But yeah, there's so many other things that are extremely interesting. So it's like, for me, I think about this all the time. How can I get Black people more involved? It would be so cool. It's like badass, this dance, but it's like, you got to sell it first, right?
Yeah, and yes, and I'm also just hearing like really troubling shit from Black dancers in our community. So if you even get past the point where somebody's like into how hard it is and into sort of possibly the old timey aesthetic of it, then we finally get them there. And you know, I'll keep reposting, but there was a roundtable discussion with women of color, and I could not believe what I was hearing about the things that they're experiencing in the Malongas. We have a real problem here. I mean, and it just seems related that there was a dance and a people. We have tango, and the Blackness was taken out. It's purposely taken out of it in a lot of ways. I mean, the culture of Argentina underwent this period where they were really trying to be whiter and more European. And I just can't help but think that that has trickled down somewhere and contributed to an environment where I have heard tango described as bigoted over and over and over again by many different people from different communities. It's unacceptable, and I think I'm still figuring my way into, yeah, what to do about it, and yeah, I think starting here feels like the right place to start, and I'm still just struggling to draw the lines, or maybe I'm making it up. I don't know. Maybe it's possible that I'm overstressing the importance of this.
Megan, can you share a little bit, like what you heard from some Black women of what they were experiencing?
Yes, please share.
Okay, sure. So these are actually, I can just pull them from, I'll share again on the Oxygen page, the roundtable that was hosted by someone in Philadelphia and included Black and queer women from the United States and from the UK, and a woman living in Argentina right now. So being in a class and when they rotate partners being passed up, either like they were not seen or like they just don't want to dance with them. A sort of consistent extra level of shock at how good of dancers they are. A consistent question of being at a milonga in full tango regalia and being asked what they're doing there. So I find these things to be both subtle and overt. I mean, it's not subtle to pass somebody up as a partner in a class. It's not subtle to not realize that a Black person can be a tango dancer at a milonga.
I understand exactly what you're saying, Megan. I will say, because I've had my own personal experiences in milongas as well, like a heads up, if the organizer is still the same organizer 2 years ago, don't go to the red carpet at Las Vegas. He's very racist. So with that being said, he mentioned something to a friend of mine asking, this was 4 years ago, because this was right around the election. But yeah, he basically just said to a friend of mine, he was like, what are you doing associating yourself with this Black girl? Like, you know, we're going to win the election, Trump is going to win, and then you're not going to want to be associated with someone like that anymore. And he said that, and these things happen. So the thing is that when I see that, I don't necessarily see that the Argentine tango has an issue with Black people. I see that this organizer in North America has an issue. If I went, I will admit, when I went to Argentina, one benefit that I had about when I went to Argentina is because there's not a lot of Black people there, because of whatever happened in roughly between 1850 to 1868, whatever happened, how they pushed the people out, how the people were dying on the front lines, exactly what David said, because they wanted to be more of a European country, and that the Spanish were very adamant about this. Yes, baby, the Spanish.
Yes, I mean, honestly, it's not that we push the Black people,
Yeah,
but we actually work along with the natives. The natives
yes,
were like, okay, sure, the Spanish people were like, this is the Bible. God has the truth. Do what God wants, and God wants you to help us. So we use the labor from the
I don't know if you
Native
guys can hear him, but yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good, excellent. Yeah, so based off of that and how most of the people ended up in like what you see now, Uruguay and Brazil, how there's like a high percentage of that. My personal experience, I'm not going to speak for everyone. My personal experience is that they really wanted to embrace me as a North American Black woman. They very much saw my color and they admired my color. They wanted to talk about how they wish they had more people of my color there. But these were the people that I were affiliated with. I'm not going to say that they don't have racist people, because I think globally we have racist people and that shit needs to get fixed real quick. But with that being said, I do know that there are as many people over there that empathize with the fact that, you know, color is the same thing and that they want to support that. With that being said, the racial issues that I have in milongas are these particular organizers or these particular people that feel that same old idea that I think, Megan, you feel in your bones, where you feel that they are still trying to keep that European idea. And so that's where it feels like, oh, is this the Argentinian way of thinking of this? I think that is their way of thinking of it. I think what we have done in the community by diversifying it is realizing that this isn't everyone's dance. But yeah, I will agree with you. There are people that want to keep that whole European idea of the tango, like let's keep it European and it stays European. And this guy was like a perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to piggyback on what Lauren said, it really, time and again, like it just gets proved to us that it depends so much on the organizer. you know, the organizer is just sets the atmosphere of the milonga. And just look at what you guys are doing in Oxygen, and you know, so I think that's just a really key important part, the organizer.
Yeah,
Stephanie, you were nodding there a few minutes ago. Was there something you wanted to weigh in on?
I was just resonating with all this, and I listened to the roundtable that Megan was referring to, and I was thinking about some of the conversations and what the panelists were discussing, what the women were talking about, and why they felt that they were being passed over for dances. And I think I told Megan that a lot of, you know, that there were definitely some scenarios that they spoke of that sort of resonated with me. And I will say that for the most part, I felt welcome everywhere that I've been. I felt included and welcome, but there are still, because I haven't been dancing nearly as long as any of the panelists had, or, you know, most of the folks here have been dancing. And so from my mind, there's a multitude of reasons why maybe I don't dance as much, or a lot of things. But then in the back of my mind, there's still that, you know, that identity thing playing in the back of my mind. I don't look like anybody else here. I'm, you know, I don't dance as well. So I feel like sometimes it feels like there is, you know, maybe I'm not as experienced as a dancer, so that's one strike, but then is my ethnicity another strike that makes people less likely to talk, you know, to want to dance or approach or any of those other things. But I'm saying all that to say that it really causes, it encourages a lot of self-reflection and thinking about, you know, what do I need to do differently, you know, to be more, to fit in better. And I think that's perhaps a thing that happens with a lot of people when you're in an environment where you are not like everyone else. And that's like, I feel like that's sort of a charged thing to say, but yeah, that's my thought.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm curious if anybody has any closing thoughts. I would like to, so we said this was part one, the history. Part two is going to be the present, Blackness and Tango, the present. I want to know why there is such a huge conservative street in Tango. I want to know why it seems like most of the people that I see saying offensive shit on my social media are from the Tango community. I want to know, and I want us to talk about it. We also, if you have suggestions or feedback about what we talked about tonight, or what we should continue to cover, we would love to hear them. And yeah, I'll just open the floor for last thoughts from people, if there are any.
Megan, I'll just add on what you were just talking about there. One thing that one other comment that sort of struck me was a part of the discussion revolved around socioeconomic level and occupation, and what the person that's drawn to tango, as we were talking earlier about, you know, having the resources to engage in it, but also being able to be around your peers. And, you know, I think they were saying in certain parts of Europe, most of the folks that dance tango were, you know, academics, or in certain other medical professions or things like that. And so when you go to a milonga, everyone there was either a doctor, a lawyer, a college professor, or something like that. I don't necessarily know that's the case here, but I thought that was an interesting point about the person that is drawn to tango and that sticks with it.
Yeah, Megan, you mentioned something very interesting. You mentioned why tango tends to attract, I'm saying it in my own words, how I heard it, how tango tends to attract very conservative people that share things that you consider outlandish, myself as well. But yeah, That's interesting. I almost feel like we need to have a whole nother Zoom session on this alone.
Well, we're gonna.
So I won't talk too much about it, but yeah, I feel that you are tapping into what you're asking, is that it's going to open up the rules of tango and how the rules affirm the traditional and old school way of thinking. And maybe we should be talking about that. But that's my thoughts.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'm glad that the conversation kind of went this way naturally. We are already starting to make the transition to talking about today. We've really been, you know, we don't really know how to address it, so we probably will be reaching out to you guys. We're very open to suggestions for how to go about talking about it. Yeah, I certainly think that, I don't know, just thinking about this and researching it more is really, I already had a lot of issues with the whole notion of tango authenticity and what the real dance is and what isn't, and who's doing the real thing, and everything that goes with it. But finding out how really deceptive, for lack of a better word, that vision of authenticity is I actually just find very empowering. It was things that I always felt intuitively, but but just have more information and more knowledge to stand on. And it's really something that we've struggled with a lot. We have a tango school in a Black neighborhood, and you know, it's hard to keep people in tango in general, no matter what neighborhood you're in. Is our batting average in Inglewood worse than anywhere else? Honestly, not sure it is. But I also know that it can't help how ignorant that we've been of tango's history and how poorly we've communicated it to our students. And so we've just been thinking and talking about that a lot, and we want to keep talking about it next week. So sounds like there's
and just one closing thought that I have. I think you guys, David and Megan, I just feel that you guys are doing this sincerely. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. All right.
Nicole, final thoughts? I always want to make sure there's room for Nicole.
I'm still grateful that you placed the studio in Inglewood. So thank you for helping me save on gas. But no, because we need stuff like that in our community, but also understand having a white establishment in a Black community, especially around the last several years with the idea of gentrification. Don't be surprised if you get stares. That's just because of the territory, even though Inglewood, everyone's paying top dollar for the property. They're not really bringing the property down and inviting it up. Most of the time, people are overpaying the houses, but it's still a good thing. I'm gonna throw this out here. If this is for some of my other people in the community, I would look up Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility. Why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. That popped up on my video a couple of days ago, so I've been looking at one of her lectures, and she breaks it down, the programming of the white person, especially here in America, perfectly. And she does raise quite a bit of biases that those people of color and African Americans face on a daily, consistent basis. So Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility. That's your book and that's your lecture. I recommend you watching it. Yes, you'll feel uncomfortable. Feel the uncomfortableness and recognize what you've been taught, because we have to go through it every day. But no, continue to still talk about this, because it's still present in the music, it's still present in the dance. Maybe this might change of how it's taught a little bit. I think this also, the African roots of tango also kind of explains why there's that improvisational aspect of it, because of all of our dances, you know, you just do a two-step and then we make melodies off a 1-2 step. You know, we don't go to take the class. And Any dances, like if we have backyard parties or something, like growing up as a kid, I would just learn from what my parents did, and they learned from what their parents did, and so forth and so forth and so forth. And that's how we learned. So like Lauren said, you didn't go to a formal class. If you went to a formal class, it was more likely in classical ballet or in classical jazz and tap. You did that. But other dances, no, you just went down the street and you went to your friend's house and you just learned. So now I used to think the snootiness was like a Los Angeles thing because I'm from LA. And I did watch the roundtable talk, the Tango discussion. And even though I have not been to too many milongas because of work, but there was like a looming cloud over that, but I didn't necessarily think of race. I was just thinking, did I Cabo sail ride? Did I stand at a certain angle? Did I, am I staring too hard at the person? Did I nod first when they were supposed to nod? So I go through a checklist. I thought that was just me because I'm learning. But after hearing those stories, it's like, yeah, that's more plausible. I got passed up because, I didn't look like anyone else in the room. I've gotten that question more so like, are you here for tango? And it's a Saturday and longer with you guys. And it's like, there's 10 people here. Of course I'm here. I'm not just sitting just to be sitting. So it is, it can be disheartening, but again, that's the everydayness that most African Americans, people of color deal with every day.
Nice. Nicole, I will dance with you anytime. I do want to talk about that too. So if you guys can please invite me to the next one when we talk about the rules of tango and all that. I lead and follow, and I would love to talk about why that is liberating in general.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your patience with us. Thanks for being willing to teach us. Thanks for being willing to share your knowledge and your experiences with the community. This is uncharted territory for us, and I think for the tango community in general, to be taking the time to talk about these things. Yeah, we're thinking about it. We're talking about it. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Megan and Dave, for having me.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Joao. See you next
Stay
week.
doing it.
See you next week.
David.
Bye.
Nice to
Good
see
night,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
You
Bye,
too.
guys.